I was kind of lost in a way because I didn't have any friends. I wanted to be in the Tower. Tower was like something. It was like a dream to be in a band like that, and it just was very discouraging and hurtful that with all the ability and all the talent that God has given us, that it was being wasted by getting loaded. Because the getting loaded thing became the first thing. Music was second. And so that's why I left. We were losing our thing, you know. We were repeating ourselves. We were not nice to each other. It was like a little drug gang.
Enter Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
Welcome, everybody, to Intersect Radio. Thank you all for tuning in. We've been kind of redoing things here at Intertalk Radio since the NAMM show. I hope you all were there and got to see some of the interviews and seminars. We broadcasted and did there at NAMM. And if not, you can find them on our site, intertalkradio.com. Very informative things about music instrument retail and things like that. And I'm back today live in living color. And my guest today is the one and only Mr. David Garibaldi. David.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks for being here, man. This is like, this is something I never dreamt about.
Me either. We're both in the same place.
So I know you guys know who David Garibaldi is, so we won't go into that. But Tower Power is here in town. They've been here for 2 nights here in Nashville. And I was at the show on Saturday night. It was a great show, man. It was great to see you back in the band. See you back on your throne.
Good to be here.
Yeah, man.
For that.
Yeah, you seem to have a renewed sense of something, you know, just fresh.
Well, when your life is almost taken away and then you survive it, it gives you a little different thing.
Right.
You know.
Right. You're a blessed man. You're a blessed man.
Nobody's arguing about that.
Yeah.
That's for sure, yes.
Yeah, man. That's pretty awesome. But we all know about your drumming abilities and all the things you've done for the drumming community over your career. But we don't know, at least I don't know that much about your life, about David Garibaldi and, you know, where you got your start as a kid, what were your interests, and how you got into drumming, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I'd be glad if you can share some of that with us.
Okay, well, let's start here. I was born in Oakland, California.
So you're originally from Oakland?
Well, you could say that, but I didn't grow up there. David, closer on the mic. Yes, sorry. Yes, I didn't live there until later in my life, but was born there. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Pleasanton, California. My grandparents were immigrants from Portugal and Italy. Grew up in a home where my parents spoke those languages every day, but they didn't teach my brother and I. So my brother and I got Italian later on. My brother and I didn't get any of the language there, so we heard it every day, and we had all the cultural things, but the most important part of the culture we didn't get was the language. Mm-hmm. But still, it was really great growing up in that environment. You know, I still look back at it and think how cool it was, how great all my relatives were. And, you know, I'm sure they were going through things that everybody goes through, but there was always a lot of joy, always a lot of, friendly stuff going on, a lot of laughter and that kind of stuff, So that's the things that I remember, growing up in my house. And there was always good music too. My parents really liked music, especially my mother. She played the piano. She played by ear. And, eventually she took some lessons and could read music and that sort of thing, But she was always playing. And then we'd have little family get-togethers. And I had an aunt who could, sing. She played the piano, so they'd have little sing-along things. And it was always kind of fun,
Okay.
So then when fourth grade came around, that's usually the time in school where they bring you the music teacher comes in and asks people who wants to be in the band. So the teacher comes in, he says, who wants to be in the band here? Of course, I raised my hand, as a lot of other kids did. And I wanted to play the trumpet. And so by the time they got to me, all the trumpets were gone. And so they said, well, what about violin? So, oh boy. So I tried that. And of course, no offense to anybody, but it sucked, And so I stopped playing for a while, because that just didn't interest me. Violin was not something that I'd ever pictured myself playing. I still love trumpet players to this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then when I was 10 years old, my mother was playing this recording called The Saber Dance. And it was like all this drums and all this other stuff in it, percussive sounds and everything. And I thought, wow, this is really great. And she played it often, and I was always fascinated by it. So finally one day I said, well, I'd like to play the drums. So I went and I asked the music teacher if I could, try playing music again. He said, sure. I told him I wanted to play drums. Well, so I started in elementary school band, and he was a very good teacher, but he was a yeller. He liked to yell, and he did lots of it. And so I didn't like that. And so I would go hide in the bathroom, and there was a couple other guys too that didn't like it. And so he would come and find us in the bathroom and then drag us over to the music room, when it was time for our lesson and that kind of stuff.
And yell at you.
Yeah. And he's like, we go hide, so we try to avoid the yelling, And, but I stayed with it, and it was just something that I was always doing.
Yeah.
Did all the, concert band, marching band, all that stuff. And then when I got in high school, I was 15, I walked in the band room and one day, and there was a kid playing a drum set. And it was the first time I'd ever been that close watching a drum set. And he was playing like kind of rock and roll beats. And he left the room. I sat down and I tried to do it myself, and I was shocked that I could do it. And it was kind of effortless. I just played what I heard, what I thought he was doing, and I did the same thing. And I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. I could coordinate myself right away,
Yeah.
And so kept going, got into drum set, played in the school jazz band, my music teachers were really fantastic in high school. Mr. Campana and Mr. Caviglia, two nice Italian boys.
Yes.
And and when I was a senior in high school, we were getting ready to finish the year, and they came to me and they said, you should seriously think about, going into music, So they set me up talked to my parents. They set me up with a man who was in the Oakland Symphony. I won't say his name, but he was in the Oakland Symphony. He taught at Mills College. He had published works, and he was a pretty, reputable percussionist, timpanist, teacher. And so my dad arranged to get me lessons with him, and I didn't like it. It was just very dry, and I wasn't interested in practicing yet. I just like to play. It was just fun to play, and to me that wasn't fun. Having to practice this stuff that I never thought was going to be of any interest or any value at all, right?
Yeah.
And so I did a couple lessons and didn't practice, and he told my dad, we should stop doing these lessons because he's never going to amount to very much musically. And so my dad was pretty cool about it. He sort of remember in the car on the way home, we didn't really talk about it, but he never said anything. He never discouraged me or anything like that. He was always very encouraging and just kind of let me find my way. You know, that's the way my parents were. They didn't, you know, when I told them I wanted to be a musician and stuff, I'm sure they, you know, had some trepidation about it, you know, but they just encouraged me to keep doing the thing that I was inspired to do. And it was, you know, that really set the stage for my life, you know, being able to make my own decisions, whether they're, you know, good or bad. Yeah. You know, it was, they didn't interfere in that, you know, that process. And so I just continued to make my way as a musician. I started playing in bands after high school. I had my own band. I was playing in a jazz band with a big band called the Sid Reese Big Band. They were, Sid Reese had a music store in Livermore, California. And he had all these retired guys who were older guys were in it, and they were playing Glenn Miller music and all this stuff. And I got a chance to be the drummer through the piano teacher that I was studying with.
Okay.
And so I couldn't even play an 8-bar solo. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. But they stuck with me, and they let me play. And I remember we did our first show on the back of a truck, big flatbed truck outside of his music store, and we got paid. And I go, what? Say what?
Money for this?
So that really, when I realized that I could make money playing the drums, that sort of got me really, really even more and more interested. And then I got drafted into the military.
Oh, yeah? What branch?
Army. But the law is that as long as you enlisted prior to your draft date, you were fulfilling your military obligation and you didn't have to go in the draft, but you had to go in the military. So I enlisted in the Air Force as a clerk so that I could get it out of the way and come back home and continue playing the drums.
What year is this?
This was 1966.
Okay.
And so I went in the Air Force, and in basic training, one of the instructors comes around. He said, who plays a musical instrument? And I raised my hand. He said, you want to be in the band? I said, yeah. So he took me over, and I auditioned for the Air Force Band at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where I was doing basic training. And I had already auditioned for the 7th Army Band at the Presidio in San Francisco, and I was not good enough then to do it. So I thought, well, I'll do this audition and see how this goes. Yeah. I'm not sure this is going to go good either. Yeah. But then I did it, and when I got my orders for my first duty station, which said McCord Air Force Base, Tacoma, Washington, it said 724th Air Force Band. So
wow, really?
So, you know, I got to continue doing music, you know. Man. And so it just kind of went like that, you know.
Were you there for 4 years?
I was there for 3.5 years.
3.5 years?
And it was a tremendous experience. I mean, I got to play with a lot of really great young guys. We had an excellent concert band. That's when I really learned a lot about mallet percussion and started getting into that. Classical snare drum, great drum set players. The section leader, percussion section leader, was a man named Jim Nolan, who eventually went to the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C., played timpani with them for years and years. And I believe he was the section leader, percussion section leader for the Air Force Band for many years. And really taught me so many great things. He was just a really good guy, but could really play. And so I learned lots about playing in a big band, playing in small groups, you know, just a lot about the finesse of playing different styles of music, the interpretation of different kind of styles of music, you know, how you do it, how you switch your brain around, you know, when you do different things. And it was really tremendous. You know, I got involved with local guys, you know, playing funk music, Mr. Charles and the Entertainers.
Ooh, Mr. Charles.
In Tacoma, Washington. And that was really fun, man. I had so many good times with those guys. Yeah. And they taught me a lot about that music. And it was really, really great. Then I got out of school, or I got out of the military early to go to school. They gave you like a 6-month early out. So I took that, went back to the Bay Area, and got into school and that sort of thing, and then started playing around the Bay Area, and was subbing for a drummer in a band called the Reality Sandwich. This was in Oakland. And it was a band, a kind of hippie drug dealer band.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
The
Reality Sandwich,
yeah.
yes.
And so also who was doing some subbing in the band at the time was Mike Clark, who, you know, we talked about him earlier.
Headhunters.
Got the gig with the Headhunters and stuff. But this was before we were doing anything like that. And
was he playing rock before that?
He was playing that, but he was like that time also a really great jazz drummer. That was really his thing, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he was the lead dog when that stuff was, going on, because he could just really do it well. You know? And so we became very, very friendly. And one night when I was playing there, 2 guys from the Tower of Power came in. Mick Gillette and Skip Mesquite both have passed away. Yeah. But they invited me to come and check out the band. Come and say that we have to make a change, in our drum chair. Would you be interested in coming to check it out? So I went and saw them. They were at the Keystone Corner in San Francisco, up on Vallejo Street, there in North Beach, and they were doing like original music plus really obscure cover songs that nobody knew about, unless you really dug music. Then you all the B-side kind of stuff. So unless you knew that music, you'd never know what those songs were. But they were really cool, and they were doing them kind of in their way,
which made them sound original.
Exactly, exactly. And they already had a vibe going on. They had a really, really great, sound already. There was just, some kind of thing happening with them. You look at them, you hear them. There was something going on there. Rocco was playing bass. He was 18, and he was like sounding. He was one of the reasons the band sounded so great, is because of the way he approached, rhythm and that kind of stuff, and some of the songs that they were doing too. It was cool bass songs. Old school funk songs. Howard Tate and all this stuff. And so I had hadn't met any guys in the band yet. I just was listening to them, but when I heard them, I knew that I was going to be in it. I had no doubt, even before they knew. And then eventually, soon after that, I met Emilio, and he invited me to come to play with the band. And I played, and they liked it. And here I am in your music room.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to take a pause for the calls right now. We'll be back in about 2 minutes with my guest, Mr. David Garibaldi.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
Welcome back, everybody. Here we are, Tuesday. I'm sitting here with David Garibaldi. Yeah, I know. Eat your heart out. That first segment was great, man. Like you said, you went from being born to like
0 to 23 in 15 minutes.
It's like, do you know yourself or what?
Oh, man.
How many times have you told this story?
Well, parts of it, but never, in one big episode.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you're doing it here. And so we were at, you had just gotten into TOP and you knew you had the gig.
Yeah.
And
even before I had it.
Even before you had it. Yeah.
And then I got to play with them. And it was an instant connect. There was never a doubt as to whether I would be in it, you know. I began working with the band. We began rehearsing. I think we did our kind of, so July 23rd, 1970 was my first gig with the band.
Okay.
In Lake Tahoe, California. And I think we played to VFW Hall, something like that. And then we went up to the North Shore. We played this little restaurant, little bar called The Stop. And The Stop was kind of, we were there for several nights, and we slept on the floor.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So we were getting an echo.
Yeah. We're getting a terrible echo.
Keep going.
Yeah. Keep going.
All right. So we slept on the floor. Ignorance is bliss, right? Nobody cares when you're 23 years old and you're loving what you do. You'll sleep on the floor. We had all our gear in a van and all that stuff, and it just kind of went from there. We started rehearsing for that first record that we did, East Bay Grease, because the Tower had won a record deal at the Fillmore West. Bill Graham had this thing called Sounds of the City, and they had won this recording contract. Sort of like, it was like a battle of the bands, and it was on with a subsidiary of Atlantic Records called San Francisco Records. It was one of Bill Graham's labels. He had two labels, Fillmore Records and San Francisco Records. And so I think Cold Blood was on the Fillmore label, and that was a CBS one, and then we were on the San Francisco Records, which was an Atlantic one. And so I joined the band in July. We started rehearsing, doing gigs, Tower style, like blue collar, man. It's like, every day of the week you're either doing a gig or you're rehearsing or you're recording or you're doing something, It's like It's a very labor intensive sort of gig. It always has been that way. It's still that way today.
Yeah.
And so we began rehearsing, and we started in September. We recorded East Bay Grease at Mercury Records on Mission Street in San Francisco. And in November it was out. So
really?
Yeah. So these days, you do recordings, it's like, this epic, projects that people do. We're just finished one ourselves. It takes a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in those days, it's like you record and then you put it out. I mean, It wasn't, that other.
Press it and put it out.
Just do it, man. Yeah. The blemishes and all.
Yep.
And so that's what we did. And so then we started touring. I remember when we did our first tour, I think one of the first gigs was at the Fillmore East. And with Santana and Roland Kirk.
Ooh, Rashawn Roland Kirk?
Yeah. And so it was, our first trip to New York. And Santana, we were already friends with them, of course, from the Bay Area and all that stuff. And so I can't remember if we had toured with them yet. Maybe the tour was started later because I met Michael Shreve, became really friendly with Michael Shreve, and then he invited me to live at his house. And so we had this like little drum hang going on at his house, and it was we had really, really good time. And that's how we kind of hooked up with Carlos and them, and they, took us, on the road with them. We did many, many dates with Santana. And so the Fillmore East gig, we're all excited about it because, Miles Davis had come because he was like, friends with Carlos, and,
right.
He was kind of enamored with, Carlos's thing and all that. And, so I'm listening to Roland Kirk's set, and I'm in the audience, right, standing on the side. And he's playing, and pretty soon he tells the audience that they don't know anything about black music. And the audience starts to get really pissed off, really agitated, and they start responding to because he's taunting them. He keeps going on, and they keep saying, and they're kind of in a chorus. The whole building's going bullshit, bullshit, bullshit.
Really?
So they're going back and forth like this. And this is my first time in New York City ever experiencing something like this. I was absolutely stunned. He finishes his set, and they give him a standing ovation. I'd never seen anything like that ever. So he insults them because he was obviously insulted by them, right? And it was just back and forth going on. And he's playing all of his music, right? And then gets a standing ovation at the end. They ate it up totally. Full contact concert. I was going, oh, man. And then it also at that time, like he had an entourage of guys. Kind of his little crew he had a guy that had a long robe on with a shepherd's crook with bells on it and stuff. And he'd kind of walk in front of, Rasan and the rest of the band with pounding the floor. And he had a name. He was the minister of something. And we were like in shock, man. I'd never seen, we come from Bay Area, man, Oakland. I mean, come on, you see a lot of stuff there, but this was
Rashawn. Rashawn was doing this 3-horn thing.
Yeah,
too, right?
Of course he is. Yeah. Manzello, Stritch, and all this other nose flutes and everything else. And he was doing his thing, and he made a really great band, killer band. And it was the first time I'd ever seen jazz musicians that were heroin addicts. His piano player at the time, he would play brilliant solos, and then when the solo was done, he'd put his hands in his lap and his head would go down and he'd nod out.
Wow.
And so when it was time for him to play, he'd wake up and he'd play, and it'd just be as vicious, as badass as possible. And then when it was done, he'd go back to nodding out. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. So this is like, real education, like for us, man. It was really something. So, it was our first, and then our first tour, the rest of the tour, nobody knew about us. None of the records were in the stores or any of this stuff. And, it was like that. But we persevered. And then we had met Doug Clifford, who was the drummer with Creedence Clearwater. And he had approached me to give him lessons at his house, secret lessons at his house. I'm sure he doesn't mind if I tell his story now. Secret lessons at his house in Kensington. He lived in Kensington, the Berkeley Hills, right? And so I'd give him these lessons and stuff, and we had a great time. He's a really great guy. We got along really well. And he says, one day, he says, "You guys interested in going on the road with us?" Hell yes. So our first two big major experiences on the road were with Creedence Clearwater and with Santana. And so the playing kind of music that we played and kind of like, who was in the band, sort of, like a mixed race band and that kind of stuff. And I remember we went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and Skip and I went to this little place to eat. And it was like, kind of like roaches kind of crawled out from under the counter and stuff. And the woman behind the counter had a beard, it was just really like surreal, man. And then we do the gig, right? And of course we played when the lights were on. People are filing in and we're playing our music, Skunk the Goose and the Fly and, The Price and Back on the Streets Again and all this stuff, and people are throwing stuff at us.
Really?
Yeah, they were throwing stuff at us.
Who was singing lead at that
Rick
time?
Stevens.
Rick was singing?
Yeah, Rick Stevens. Because, Rufus at the time was gone already. He left early on because he felt that he was getting stolen from. And so, he wanted his money, but there was no money to be had.
Yeah.
So, also, God rest his soul, he's gone too. But he was a really cool guy, but that's something that happened like early on. So when I first heard the band, there was at the Keystone Corner, Rick and Rufus were both in the band, but they wouldn't sing together because they didn't like each other.
That's different.
Yeah. So the band had two singers, right?
So they
didn't sing together like Sam and Dave or something. It wasn't anything like that.
So they just sang whatever they sang on the record. They would sing. On stage.
Yeah. So Rick would sing "Sparkling in the Sand" and the kind of other.
That became his thing.
It did,
and
it was really something, man.
Wow,
so,
man, yeah. Back in the day, in those days, things were. I don't know if kids have those experiences now. Musicians, when it was like a wild frontier. It was like things were being created, new things are happening. And you just never knew, what it was going to lead to. But you kind of had support to do it. There was a living wasn't as expensive. You hang out with friends, and it was just a new experience.
Well, learning was, there was not YouTube,
right?
And there wasn't that. Cassettes were just starting to happen, so there was records, right? And the radio. And so that was your kind of like your touchstone was, those things. And so you got your records that you liked and, tried to listen as closely as you could to the recordings and, pick out stuff. And if you had the good fortune to see them in concert or stuff, they came through your town, that was a whole other thing. But, learning there was not YouTube, no internet. So learning was like on a more regional, local level, your friends, your circle of friends. You exchange ideas, you get together and play,
We used to do that all the time in the living room
People
at home.
come to my house and we would play together and, exchange drummer hangouts and practice together and, that kind of stuff, So it was really, really fun, And then the early 70s in the Bay Area was like, it was kind of like a gold rush, man. It was like the most unbelievable musical thing. There was like all the record companies were there. Bill Graham, was doing his thing with, the Fillmore and other shows. There was tons of live music venues with people playing original music all over the place. There was like really unique players everywhere. It was like virtuosity on a creative level, as opposed to like someone who is a classical musician or somebody that has really good mechanical skills. This was like a whole other thing. It was I call it creative virtuosity because people were like they were just doing things that they heard, things that they felt.
Right.
And so you could go out every night and you could hear somebody do something in all these different styles of music that you never heard before, and it was all really, really, really great. There was jazz, there was blues, there was the funk, there was the psychedelic music, there was Latin music, there was great jazz, there was everything, and so that was the mix.
And it wasn't all about the money,
Not really, I mean, that's, I'm fortunate, I guess, in that I never, I wouldn't call it fortunate. I never worried about the money because I always had the feeling that, and kind of that I was going to be always working, and I was always somehow going to come out on the winning end of things, if I would just do what I do.
Yeah.
That was always the thought, was just do what I do and, do it now and worry about it later, that kind of thing, and I didn't have those sort of concerns, I know that that's a tough thing for people, when you try to feed yourself with art, right? It's the age old thing. That's why, like the Renaissance and they, patrons of the arts and all this other stuff, and some of the great, when you go to Italy and you see all the great paintings and the, Michelangelo and all these guys, they had people supporting them, like to do that kind of stuff, so that art was able to live, for centuries.
And they were unfortunately more successful as dead people than they were living when they were creating
the art, the art thing, so when you have to feed yourself with your art, it puts a whole other level of pressure on people, So with my students, like I always ask them, are you okay with this? What is it that you want to do? Give me your idea of what it is that you want to create, how you want to do things, when we go from there. And, we talk about making a living doing music and all this stuff. And I encourage people, man, if you have pressure, financial pressures that are interfering with your artistic life, then get a job. Go do something to feed your family and have art occupy the place in your life that it should, which is an enhancement, something to make your life enjoyable, a release, a creative release, right. And then figure out how to feed your family, feed yourself, that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not. It's not, man. It's being responsible for the people who you're responsible for is like definitely more important, And if that's the route you're going to go, then you got to be aware of that commitment. Yes. It's like a double commitment. You don't want to abandon the things you love, but you love these people. These are real people. And once you make that commitment to them, you should be in there. That's correct. Yeah. All right, we're going to be back, folks. I'm here with David Garibaldi. Yes.
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear, host of Sound Experience here on Intertalk Radio. And Source Connect by Source Element is the essential tool that we use to link between my studio in Austin, Texas and the WS radio station in San Diego. Now with Source Connect, not only can we communicate in real time and with HD audio, but it's synced up and is of a high enough quality that I can use it for real-time ADR work, remote recording and overdubbing, and it even allows me to remotely control a DAW. Source Connect by Source Element. Affordable, high-quality audio and video connection over the internet for all of your production needs.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Make this your vinyl night. I'm John J.R. Robinson, and every week, music creation comes alive through stories, experiences, and sounds when vinyl records filled our hearts and minds. My friends and I share our tips and techniques used in creation of iconic tracks for recording artists such as Michael Jackson, Eric Clapton, Quincy Jones, and Steve Winwood, to name a few. Vinyl has emerged hot, and the soul of vinyl defines art and passion which burns deepest at night. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on EnterTalkRadio.com.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
Welcome back, folks. We're here with Mr. David Garibaldi, and Dave's given us quite the rundown of his life here, man. I'm just sitting here in silence and just taking it all in.
We were stuck on 23, though. That's what a lot happened when I was 23.
Yeah. That was a whole lifetime at 23 right there. Yeah. But, Dave, I know that you're a believer in Christ, and I would really appreciate it if you would share with the audience just what was going on before your encounter with Christ and after, and how it affected you, changed your life, that sort of thing.
Well, I grew up in like a, Catholic home, Italian Portuguese people, predominantly Catholic. So I grew up in that, and, went to the church when I was a kid and did all of the, communion and confirmation and all those things, and then kind of got away from it, but always sort of had like spiritual beliefs. I always believed in God and Jesus Christ and all that stuff, For some reason, that just always kind of stayed with me. And then when I joined Tower and we started getting into, a lot of dope and, stuff like that, as soon as we made money, it seemed like everything else came along with it too, the abuse and all that stuff. And so, we had like pretty serious drug addicts and alcoholics. We had heroin addicts and alcoholics. And the people that are around us were like that. So we were kind of like, we were a band, a little family, a weird little hippie family, but it was also like a gang. It was like, it was like a bunch of little gangster dudes, who happened to play music too. And all the people around us were like that. And it got to be where I couldn't deal with it. So that's when I first left the band, and I had met, I think in the year that I had left, right before I was going to leave, I had met some Christian people from Alameda, California. And it was this man named Howard Uramian, and he had a music store in Alameda, and he was a Christian guy. And they got me involved with their Bible fellowships and stuff, and it really changed my life. It was the first time I'd met people like that who were so open and so cool and were willing to help me. And because I was kind of lost in a way, because I didn't have any friends. I wanted to be in the Tower. Tower was like something. It was like a dream to be in a band like that, and it just was very discouraging and hurtful that with all the ability and all the talent that God has given us, that it was being wasted by getting loaded. Because the getting loaded thing became the first thing. Music was second. And so that's why I left, because it just, we were losing our thing, we were repeating ourselves. We were not nice to each other. It was like a little drug gang, and when you're not into that, the people around you, they isolate you.
Yeah, they do.
Because, you're the one that's wrong, because they don't want to be told that they're, the one with the problem and messing things up.
It's a guilt trip too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was right before Urban Renewal. We were in the process of recording Urban Renewal, and I remember telling the band that I had to leave, and I said my reasons why, and it was really hard to do that, because I loved all those guys. They were my brothers. We, had done so many things together, made such great music, and really things were moving upward for us. But their drug habits kept them from really being as successful as they could have been. And so for, it's like their growth was like stunted socially, from, all the years of drug abuse and alcohol and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just continued on without them, and, continued going to these Bible fellowships were really helpful to me. I even had one in my house. I ran one in my house for a long, long time in LA. And, was able to help a lot of people and that sort of stuff. And even one year I worked for a Christian ministry. I did that for a year.
In what capacity?
Music. And after that, went back to LA, continued on, doing music there, which wasn't really enjoyable. So I needed something, like faith, really helped me get through that period, because it wasn't an enjoyable place to me musically. Music was still a big part of my life. And I even considered, getting out of music, because the music scene in LA was so kind of antagonistic and kind of anti-music in a way. There wasn't any bands. There was only freelance people and
studio guys.
It was a small group of studio people. And I, got to do a lot of really good stuff. But people talked about each other a lot. And, if you weren't working enough, you couldn't tell anybody that. So you had to have this pretend thing that you were this busy dude and doing all these sessions and all this stuff, and you're doing nothing, And there were many, many guys like that. But that was the prevailing attitude, right?
Yeah.
And it was just it was just phony.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'd go sit with guys like Joe Porcaro, who's like Yoda. And he just have such a balanced sort of perspective about everything. It was just a wonderful thing sitting with somebody like him. I remember I had all these questions about studying, because studying in LA was, there was all these teachers, and in each teacher, of course, they tell you, this is the shit. And if you don't do this, you don't have it.
Yeah.
Right. So they all had that. So I would kind of remember talking with Joe one time, and about this. And he said, well, why don't you just study with everybody and then make up your own thing, with everything that you've learned from all these people. And I never had considered that before, believe it or not. And, so that was a big moment, But, getting back to just one of them, we could have talked about LA for a long, long time. But we're getting off the message here. But the thing is that, my faith and kind of like my spiritual life kind of has always been really important to me. And even especially in the last few years, I remember when I got a divorce, my first marriage, and these Christian people that I was hanging with, they decided that I wasn't being very Christian in doing this, and so they stopped talking to me. I'm going, wait a minute. The Bible teaches love, Jesus Christ, he talked about, to love one another, and that the first commandment was love, right? And that love was the fulfilling of the law, right? And so all the Old Testament judgment and all those things that that people were levying against each other, and the way that God even dealt with people was all changed when Jesus Christ came. And then there was, he was the Redeemer, right? And so he said that love was the fulfilling of the law. There it is. That's pretty simple, isn't it? Yeah. So that passes all sorts of ethnic, social background. I mean, if people were to do that, that's the way to live, right? You just dig each other, accept each other. And so I thought, okay, these people are they're judging me now because I have this problem and I don't want to stay in this relationship that's not a healthy one. I had a daughter. I was really concerned about how that was going to go. But at the same time, as I looked down the road and saw kind of what was, what my life might be like if I stayed in there, and it was just toxic. I couldn't do it, so I moved on. And I believe that it was, God helped me to get out of the situation so that I could get my life straight and, have peace.
Yeah.
In a way, I guess it's kind of weird because our family got to, broken up, which is never a good thing. But I can also look back on it and see what decisions that I made that I probably shouldn't have made, that I could have avoided that. But hindsight is always 20/20, right? And so anyway, during this time, I just kind of decided that I was going to not worry about these Christian people, and I was just going to pray. And I was going to believe what I'd been taught, to have a spiritual relationship with God that's just you and God, right? And that God will answer your prayers. So I just took it down to that level, one-on-one, and I just prayed and believed God for inspiration about what to do to improve my life, right? And I swear, from that moment on, I've just felt that my life elevated. I could feel myself changing, by accepting that and making that decision, And so no matter what I've done that has been good or bad, God is always there with me, right? And so I always pray, and if I do something stupid, God's there with me. I know He forgives me, and people are going to do stupid stuff.
Right.
That's what we do,
Yeah.
We just the flesh.
Sheep. We're sheep.
Yeah. We just do stupid stuff. And so, but through it all, God has continued to bless my life. I have a great family. And now I'm married again, many years ago, and a great son, and still have a great relationship with my daughter. And I have a boy. He's 12. He's a beautiful little guy. I have my music life again. I got to be back in the Tower of Power, which was something that I missed, terribly.
Yeah.
Because it was the only place really that I felt comfortable musically. And so I've kind of learned how to move forward in life and to be happy about stuff, be blessed, and have gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Then in 2015, I was just kind of as a little side, I was a runner for many years. I ran miles and miles and miles and miles and miles.
Really?
I loved it, And so in 2012 or 2014, something around that period of time, I had trained for a half marathon. I did this half marathon, trained and did the whole 9 yards. And I trained while I was on the road too. So we were doing gigs, and then I'm going out and doing all these long runs every day and all this stuff. It was really fun. It was challenging, but it was really fun.
Yeah.
So I did the race, and afterward, my legs never recovered, and that had never happened before. Right. So I just had all this pain and stuff, and I tried everything. So eventually I went to an orthopedic doctor, and he said, well, you have arthritis in your right hip. It's bone on bone. You're probably going to have that replaced. And then the left one is on its way out, and so you're probably going to have that one replaced too. And he was very matter-of-fact about it. And I'm going, say what? hip replacements. That's not something I thought about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I tried everything that I could to get past that. Right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And eventually, I think we were touring with Journey, and we were out in the summer, tons of gigs, and I realized I was losing my mobility. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get fixed here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a big decision, you know. It's pretty major surgeries. I had no idea what was going to happen, and I had to have both my hips replaced. So I did that in 2015, January, and then in the summer, June, right? So I didn't know how that was going to go, you know, because all of a sudden here I'm like totally active, playing, touring around, you know, on what we call the million gig march, you know. And so I didn't know if I was going to be able to go back to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I started healing up from those things and saw that I was going to be okay. Right. So eventually, later that year, I went back to work. Right. And then, of course, in last year, January 12th, my friend Mark and I were at Yoshi's in Oakland, and we were getting ready to go to work, waiting across the street. Train goes by, and we get hit. The accident was pretty traumatic. I mean, we got really hurt pretty bad. I'd never been hurt like that. Mark almost lost his life. He was in a coma for about 8 weeks. And I'd never been that hurt ever. My whole face was broken. My jaw was bruised from head to toe. I couldn't walk. My wife had to feed me and help me put my clothes on and this kind of thing. And so it was, it just required a lot of patience because it wasn't something I was expecting to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
I think not.
But it did. And so I remember I just was talking to God, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, I want to be able to accept it, however it goes down, right? And so I had peace with that. My mom, I learned that from my mom. My mom lived to be 99. She just passed away this last year, but in the later years of her life, she was a believer, and she was able to kind of like assess things and then move on. She was kind of like letting stuff go, so she didn't carry things forward like anger and animosity and, all this other stuff, and she lived really great life all the way up until the end. She just kind of cruised off into eternity, with nothing bad, and so, she just told me that was a big thing. I remember when she was 95, she told me that. It says, I'm a believer, and, I've let things go. I don't have animosity about anything, and that was really a big deal. She also said she laughed a lot. She had good nutrition, and she gave me a little list of things that, got her to 95 that she wanted me to know about,
Okay.
And so, there's a couple of Bible verses that I always bring around. They're always in my heart for some reason, that, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ, and then there's the Timothy verse, I think it's 1:7, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. And, that I believe that the Bible is the basic principle, motivational tool for living a really, really great life. It's all in there. And that, when you read, like, I love motivational books. I love all that stuff because it just helps you to arrange your thinking,
right.
And that none of those things are at cross purposes with God's word. It's all in there.
Right.
The principle of faith or fear, what you believe, how your thought life directs where your life goes, So that's a process. And so I'm learning how to do that. I'm learning how to accept, how to be peaceful, how to be blessed and happy in, all the situations of life that I find myself in. And especially after this, last, thing, I was able to walk away from getting hit by a train.
Yeah, not too many people do that.
And I remember being at home after about 6 weeks, and I was able to put my pants on myself. It might sound kind of stupid, but that was kind of a big moment. I realized I was going to be okay. Seriously. I thought, okay,
What about your hips? You had just gotten brand new hips.
Yeah, well, they got a little messed up in the, nothing broken. I didn't have any neurological damage, no broken bones except the stuff in my face, which, they fixed. And they showed me an MRI of my head in the hospital. And it looked like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, to get all this stuff in your head, And so, but I'm just, I'm blessed and thankful, man. I'm thankful that I'm here, that I'm able to be here with you today, be able to be on the road with the band that I love playing with, and with the
baddest
guys.
band in the land.
It's just a blessing, man. I mean, I have a great family, my friends, there's a lot to be thankful for. Lots.
Yeah.
So I try to live that way,
Yeah.
just be generous with my words and with my life, to try to help people. And I believe that God inspires that.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely does. Man, well, I'm glad you're here too.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here too. There were a lot of us that were very concerned,
Me too.
And, yeah, I bet. And I'm really thankful and grateful to you for taking the time out of your day to come here.
It's
and
my pleasure.
And hang and tell us about yourself. And I want to thank you personally for inspiring a young drummer back in the 70s, and I'll never forget that. I've never forgotten it. And I always reflect back on it, sometimes when I have that why question, it's like, why do I do this? And why do I still, I still love to practice,
Once a drummer, always a drummer.
Yeah. And I go, why, and I look back on my life and I always end up sitting behind you, because that was that's my first real exposure up close.
I heard you play, so you don't have to sit behind anybody.
No, to another drummer, and going, wow, and witnessing the band, and seeing Lenny Pickett dance around, and Lenny Williams singing great, and you guys, it was just it was like that.
Yeah.
And so it always inspired me to want to do that too, go there. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And folks, you got to go see Dave play,
You can't sit behind me, but you can come.
Yeah, you can't sit behind me, None of that. But go check him out, man. He's killing it. He's killing it in the Tower of Power. It's the baddest band in the land. And if you've never seen him, you need to change that quickly. Okay. All right, Dave, thank you so much.
All right. God bless you, my friend.
God bless you, too.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al DiMeola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. Pitbullaudio.com.